We're here.
Right.
Amazing. Thank you all so much for coming to our LinkedIn Live with both and. I'm so excited to be here with Kaleana Quibell today, and we are talking about all things working parenthood, how parents are creating new career paths, and also how companies can support them.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Kaleana.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I will give a little bio and then jump into questions. So, Kaleana spent nearly a decade at Sequoia as Vice President of Wellbeing, where she championed innovative programs to enhance employee wellness and engagement. Recently, she founded Both And, a name that I love because that's our biggest goal at Sundays is to help people have both meaningful careers and families. And Both And is a company dedicated to supporting parents through products and strategies to make balancing work and family more manageable. Her mission is to create meaningful change for working parents trying to juggle it all and navigate what's next. And she uses her experience in employee benefits and her personal experience as a mom to make that happen. So excited. I know I just gave your bio, but I would love to hear a little bit, Kaleana, from you about how you got here today.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. So, Kaleana Quibell, and thanks, Ashley. I'm so glad we met through connections in LinkedIn and however that whole world worked. But yeah, so as Ashley mentioned, I spent almost 10 years working for a company, Sequoia. We helped companies establish their benefit programs. And in particular, my team focused on a lot of the benefit programs that are not so traditional, I guess today more normal, but mental health programs, fertility programs, family support, all of that. And yeah, I left that role after having my second son. I have a 3.5-year-old boy and a 1-year-old boy at home, and just wanted to spend a little bit more time with them, shift the way I was thinking about my working structure and all of it. So the conversations that spurred out of me leaving my role on LinkedIn and outside of it with friends just really like both resonated, I guess, with people in terms of what I went through and decided to leave my role. And then also what I was trying to do and realizing like I'm still an ambitious, driven professional that want to do something and just don't really know where to start with what that looks like. I put a pen to paper and started working with someone who was able to help turn my ideas into reality. And so I'm launching this website, Both And, really soon in the new year with a bunch of resources and connections and things to help people navigate all of the hard journey that parenthood is. So
Yeah, I'm so excited for Both And to make its way into the world. And I got a sneak peek of the website and branding, and I know that is like top notch. So I know everything that goes into it will be amazing too. I wanted to start by talking just about your benefits background. You've been thinking about these kind of problems for over 10 years, which I feel like makes you probably one of the biggest experts in the area.
Yeah.
Can you, for people who haven't spent a lot of time in HR and benefits, I used to work at Collective Health, which is somewhere in the middle of the HR and benefits world. But how does a broker like Sequoia work with companies? Like, how do people at those companies think about what benefits mean for their employees?
Yeah. Well, so it's really interesting because when I started my role 10 years ago, it was like we as a company were mostly in the Bay Area. And a lot of what I was doing was just centralized around like on-site wellness, which at the time looked like health fairs and flu shots and fitness challenges and, things that 10 plus years ago, a lot of companies were doing as their only form of wellness. And it usually happened around open enrollment time, right? Like there'd be a big health fair and this big hoopla around signing up for your benefits. But then the rest of the year, it would sort of taper off and was more just about how to use your medical benefits when you need it. And so what shifted though was that all of these amazing VC backed or not apps in the App Store started popping up, things like Headspace, to help with meditation and mindfulness and virtual fitness apps and all of this stuff that was really amazing. And people were downloading it on their own and using it. And then both VCs and these companies and consumers alike were like, well, what if my employer actually made this a benefit and gave this to me and my people? And it proved to be a great path for a lot of different channels. And so as a company, what Sequoia started doing is we looked at all those different partners saying, these are actually amazing solutions that can help the clients and their people be more healthy and more mindful and just better supported as individuals and parents and, everything that they are in and outside of work. So what I kind of joked our role was we were vendor matchmaker. We were just like, we'd go to a client and we'd say like, what group of people are you trying to support, or what claims area, like you have a ton of mental health claims, are you trying to address, or where are you losing people and you have a big attrition problem, how can we help that? And we would find those solutions and essentially match them up and help roll them out as a company. And I think that's become a lot more normal place, like especially like mental health benefits or fertility benefits. Like there definitely are still companies trying to get to that bar, but in like at least the tech world or a lot of these like companies that are attracting young talent, those are pretty high in demand or necessary. So that's just like a lot of what I think people think of benefits as now, right? Like it's not just about your medical and dental and vision. It's about all the things that your employer does to support you and the policies they have to support you and the programs and services that they have too. And so that's sort of what we helped build and establish. And Sequoia still does. There's an amazing team there that worked with me that still helps companies do their benefit programs and help make them really robust. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. One thing I noticed when I was working in the benefit space was like, there were starting to be a lot of these, and I think really relevant to the parents we work with, there were starting to be benefits around fertility and kind of before having a family. But I didn't notice at the time, like a lot of benefits that actually were supporting parents through this like 20 plus year journey that they're entering into. Yeah. Have you seen like benefits that are particularly interesting in that space?
Yeah. So it's really interesting you say that. So when we like go back a few years, like even pre-pandemic, and we were asked a ton about, to your point, about fertility benefits and family forming, just because I think employees were starting to call out that both from just a usability perspective, but then also like a diversity standpoint, there were groups of people that couldn't use fertility benefits. And so they really tried to expand those. And that caused like fertility benefits to be really popular. But to your point, after they had the kid, there wasn't a ton of resources. And so you started to see some like care.com's been around a really long time, or Bright Horizons, some of the actual like childcare benefits. But I think the like emotional side of how to transition back to the workforce was like a huge one. And a lot of women were quitting or leaving. I say women because it was mostly women. And so a lot of benefits started popping up like Clio and Maven that were more about like the journey that you have. So, you know, how do you breastfeed and how do you transition back to work and what is your career goals and all of those. So I think things like that are really amazing, but there's also so many cool benefits out there. Like I help advise for the company SNOO, which is like the smart bassinet, and like something you might not think of as a corporate benefit, but like how smart, right? Like I sleep breaks people in so many ways. And when you're a new parent coming back to work, having a safe and reliable way that you can support your employees and help them get better sleep. So things like that, like supporting the tools and things that parents go through, helping with healthy eating, and just even like behavioral issues and physical health with pediatrics that are virtual and support, and all of those. There's a lot of really amazing ones that are trying to look at like the whole spectrum of tools that a parent uses in that first, 6 months, year, but then even beyond with behavioral issues into, early teen years and adolescence.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting over the last few years, and I know we'll get more into this with the different career paths, but for parents who are choosing to stay in the workforce or the traditional workforce, I think they're rethinking like what it means to work for a company and how they want to work for companies. Are you seeing employers change their approach to benefits and how they support companies too, or support employees too?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I always feel like a broken wheel when they talk about the pandemic and like how much it shifted things, but it was a huge change, right? Because I think a lot of people either just completely struggled when they were already existing parents during the pandemic and everything went remote and schools that were their form of childcare disappeared and so on. But then there's a lot of people like myself that had children for the first time during the pandemic and don't know a world other than one where you work remote and handle all the responsibilities of children. Yeah. So I like personally am very lucky, but I cannot imagine what it would look like if both my husband and I were in the office 8 to 5, 5 days a week. It would just be a completely different approach to it. So I do think employers took some of the lessons of what happened during COVID and had to adapt to these remote and flexible workforces and have changed policies to allow for that flexibility, just because even though they're calling people back into the office, there is a need for people to still take off those sick days for their kids, or to be flexible with drop up and pick up times, or it would be a huge financial shift for those people to find care with the adjusted hours that they were already so accustomed to working with when they were remote.
Yeah.
So I do think workplaces have gotten really like a lot more flexible than maybe they were 8 years ago, when they said, oh, there's no way you could do your job like that. Like, people have proven it. And so even though they're getting pulled back, they're still demanding a little bit more flexibility. But I also think there's just so many new solutions and things that are out there that I think a lot of parents, where they normally just had, to your point, a fertility program, they are expanding that postpartum and just parenthood in general benefit suite to accommodate and balance out the fact that, you know, this isn't just about family forming, it's about long-term family support with all this. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are there particular benefits or like areas of benefits that you see contributing significantly to retaining, maybe specifically retaining moms at companies?
Yeah. I mean, I always put things in buckets of there's policies and there's benefits, right? So I'll start with, like, on the policy front, I think that, like I mentioned, flexibility of work is a huge one, right? Like, moms really struggle, in particular, if they are in demand in a certain number of hours and a certain time set per week, because it's just really, really hard to juggle that. So I think the policy side of adjusting things, allowing time off, additional sick days, all of it is like really, really critical, on top of course, a good amount of maternity leave and things. But then on the solution side, I think a lot of it is trying to offset everything that occupies brain space for moms. And so a lot of that is like virtual pediatric benefits. Like, I worked with a company, Summer Health, for example, and they're amazing. They're like, you know, being able to text a doctor instead of having to go into the doctor. And if you're up at 11 p.m. wondering if your kid has an earache or not, or things like that, like, that is the difference between showing up at work the next day and perhaps getting a solution overnight. So things like that are huge. I think the Maven and the Cleos of the world, like I mentioned, just being able to talk to someone about what your journey is looking like and what your career goals are, and being supportive. Like, you're not often asked, like, how is your return to work going from a professional front by an external support system. So being able to have something like that is really, really key. Companies like Brightline and things like that are doing like mental health support, or Little Otter, I think those are amazing. Like, I really struggled during the initial part of my 3-year-old like tantrum phase, to the point that I was just like, is something wrong with my child? Like, what do I do? And so I think those sort of outlets are really key. And then I know you'll go into a little bit of what Sundays does, but like, honestly, even what you do, it's like the laundry list of things I have at home of, you know, planning the gingerbread party I was mentioning to you. I'm hosting 18 kids on Sunday for gingerbread making, and have to get presents out and have to schedule appointments and manage my calendar. Like, being able to offset some of that stuff is so critical too. So I love what you're doing to help people as well.
Yeah, that's something that has just stood out to me so much as I've gotten to know the people we work with at Sundays and interviewed parents. Is just like the number of things you have to be tracking grows exponentially when you have kids, and then also if you like are trying to grow in your career and things like that, you have just like so many streams of thought that are running all the time, and it's a lot. So I think any of those resources that let you either hand off something or just make it like much easier are so valuable as a corporate benefit level.
Anything you can outsource.
Yeah, totally. Well, I would love to talk a little bit more about your journey. I know you've spent a long time at Sequoia advising companies on how to retain employees. And then you decide to move away from your full-time role earlier this year. How did you think about that decision, and what experiences went into your choice?
Yeah. I mean, it's something I grappled with for a really long time. Like, I loved the work I did at Sequoia, and I loved the people I did at Sequoia, and I loved like I had a very amazing setup too. I worked remote. I was able to get things done during the day because of that. I worked with a team of moms. Like, how often do you get to manage a team of like basically all moms? At this point, they are all moms now.
We get to work with all moms too, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's the best because they just get it. Like, there's not a single time that something came up for me as a mom and I couldn't be honest about what came up in my day or reschedule or whatnot. So it was great. And so it was really, really tricky because I think I really did struggle with, I wanted to spend more time with my boys. And I remember having this moment that it seems so silly, but my son had been really like struggling with stomach issues and things. And I remember having to like text my nanny and be like, has he been eating okay? Like, has he pooped in the last few days? Like, I just felt like I didn't know what was going on with my own child. And it's a really awful feeling that I think anyone who has to send their kids to childcare deals with sometimes, as someone's getting to spend a significant amount of time more with your kid than you are, especially during the week. And so just in these early years, it was something like I personally just wanted more of. Like, I just wanted more time with my kids. So I decided to just take a chance and do it. And I'm very lucky that like we were in a place that I got to step back and take some time to figure out what I wanted to do from a financial standpoint. But I also had this deep earning that like I knew I always wanted to work, and I actually like enjoy working. Like, I don't just view it as like a break from my children, though often days it is, but like I worked really hard in my career and I like what I'm doing, and I like working with adults and using my brain and just all the things that come along with like having a career you're passionate about. And so, yeah, so it was sort of like after leaving, I thought I might do some part-time consulting more in the field of what I was doing before, like helping companies identify how to work better with employers and advising. And I still do some of that. But what actually came out of a lot of conversations I started having with people were just that they wanted to know how I did make the leap and how I started thinking about doing my own consulting or starting an LLC, or they had questions about like, well, I really want to take 2 years off with my kids, but I feel like I'll never work again. Like, did that come into your head? And all those things do and did and still come up for me, as like, if I wanted to go back to a VP role in 3 years internally, like, would I get a job? And I don't know. And so I think all these conversations are being had silently or in little silos between groups of girlfriends, like my friends and I are doing. And I just think that there's like a bigger, more collective conversation to be had about it. So like I was saying a little earlier when we were talking, I put the pen to paper and started just saying, well, how do we bring those stories to light? Like, I joke and reference, it's like Chicken Soup for the Soul or Humans of New York, where like you just read a story and you identify with it so deeply, or feel for that person and want to offer advice, that I think that there's more conversations to be had. So started thinking about this concept of both and, which is the name of the site, because I just believe that, you can be both and, right? Like, you can be this great mom that wants to be home with your kids and still want a career, and you can want a break from working and also still want to contribute your brain in ways that are meaningful. And it's just, how do you find all those things? So that's kind of where I'm at in terms of working on all that.
Yeah, I love that so much. I want to get more into both and talk more about what you've found. But I think that we see like very similar things. And I think that the conversation is often, as you mentioned, happening kind of in private, or something people are like embarrassed to be thinking about. And someone was asking me like, how do people find Sundays when they get recommended it from a friend? And I'm like, I think they're just like having a hard time and they're talking to a good friend and they're like, today was really tough. Like I like got a promotion, but that meant I couldn't go to like my kids. I can't go to my kids' soccer games anymore, and things like that, where there are just these constant trade-offs that people are like having conversations with their friends about, but not necessarily getting, not being exposed to like, what is everyone else doing? What are my options here? So I'm super excited that you're kind of bringing this conversation more into the public eye and giving people that opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
I think I saw that you mentioned you had like 7 rock star friends, amazing friends in the last year who also decided to quit their jobs after having a child. What drove them to make that decision?
Yeah, so it's crazy. It's kind of funny. I'm on the same wavelength or, childbearing ages, I guess, of so many of my friends. And a lot of them, whether I think it happened for a lot of my friends after their second kid. It's sort of like the first kid, you're just like, okay, this is what everyone does. We just balance it and we try and we struggle and we feel like we're keeping our head above water. But like all moms just do that. And then the second kid sort of comes along or you get pregnant. And a lot of my friends were just like, there's no way, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this when the second or third comes into the picture. And so I had a lot of friends who they hit that sort of second kid or just realization with the first or third at the time that they were getting, to your point, promoted to this position that required more hours or more travel or more in-person appearances. And that was just like a trade-off that they weren't willing to have. And so a lot of them just, to me personally, would say, well, because I asked, why don't you go part-time or why don't you ask? And they're like, there's no way I could do my job part-time. There's no one in executive positions that does that. And I think that's a big thing that with both and I'm also trying to bring more awareness to and like advocate for change in the workplace is it shouldn't be like that, right? Like the part-time positions that if you go to job boards or sometimes people share these things, they're almost always like admin positions or coordinator or, very administrative things in nature. And I see absolutely no reason that someone in a VP role can't be part-time. Like I maybe there needs to be two of them working together to create an equal one person. But I just look at how I left for 6 months for maternity leave and like the ship didn't sink at my company, and multiple people pieced together my job and made it work. And I know that it's tricky and takes time, but I do foresee that there's ways they can do that. And so I think I look at those 7 friends I had and not a single one of them wanted to leave in the sense that they were just giving in their career, were never interested, always wanted to just be a stay-at-home mom and that's all they wanted. It was more that they were just we're drowning so much that my husband and I had to pull straws, and I actually pulled my own straw because I want to stay at home more, but never planned to leave. I always wanted to stay in this career. And if I could do it a few days a week, I would have done it in a second. So yeah, the conversation becomes how do you make that change? How do you do a 4-day work week? How do you be remote? How do you be a partial advisor or board member that allows you to have that high level of ownership and responsibility that you earned, but do it in a lesser capacity so you can also be there for your kids in this time? I think that's why they left, but would have stayed if there was some sort of solution in a different capacity.
Yeah, I am excited and I hope that more companies are exploring that. I've talked to a few people who have done job shares and I think it works well in companies where there are very specific metrics that they're hitting. So if you're in a sales role, you can be well, we collectively hit our sales goal or something like that. I think companies in general struggle to really evaluate what success and good work looks like. And so then they don't know how to split that or how to reduce that down to a 3-day work week or something like that, which is tough. But I hope more companies are working on.
Yeah, that's what we're going to try to work on.
Yeah. Well, I would love to hear, I know you have kind of 3 pathways that you see parents facing when they are kind of coming to this decision point. I would love to hear more about what those 3 paths are and how you're thinking about them.
Yeah. So when I was sort of designing, not just the site, but even thinking about the different journeys I've seen my friends take or want to take or express taking, there's sort of 3 buckets. And this is what you'll see as both and comes out with a little bit more on the site, but it's sort of this concept of, stay, shift, or step away. And the reason being is that it's not as simple as you want to stay in your job or you just want to quit completely and be a stay-at-home parent, or take a career break, whatever you want to call it. There are just so many variations of it, but I think that the 3 buckets that they fall into are that. So what I'm hoping to show with the site and advocate for resources and whatnot, and maybe even if you're listening, you might fall into one of these buckets. But so with stay, that is the person I define as wanting to stay in their existing role, but they just don't know how to do it in a different capacity. So 4-day work weeks, doing reduced hours, having an adjusted schedule, shifting days of the week you work. And someone who really enjoys their job, the example of even the 7 women I gave, they didn't want to leave their job. They'd maybe been there 5-10 years, but just didn't know a way to do it. So it's how do you stay? How do you find an example of a 4-day work week you can bring to your company and say, here's how other companies are doing it. These are the ideas I have for metrics. So sort of advocating for that shifted role within your existing career. And then the second being shift is really someone who like loves what they're doing and maybe feels really passionately about a component of the work they do, but has thought about like going on their own. So I think you see a lot of people on LinkedIn talking about fractional work or doing their own consulting or starting an LLC. But as someone who did that and like started my own LLC to be able to do side contract work, it is so daunting and there's so many steps to it. And how do you get started and how do you price and how do you network and can you even do it? And so there's a ton of resources that I hope to bring to light that I used and friends have used to help people make that shift if that's what they want to do. And then thirdly is that step away. So, you know, if you do want to take a full-on career break and that's something you need to or want to do, but are someone who always imagines going back to the workforce at some period of time, I think there also needs to be a lot of resources and conversation and story sharing of how do you do that or what made someone do it and be successful, or like even just addressing the fears you have. I talked to a friend the other day who really wants to leave, but she's like, what if I start doing it and I let our nanny go and 3 months into it, I just absolutely hate it and I miss working? Like, is that going to be a huge mistake? So I think, again, this is where just that story sharing becomes so important, is people need to be able to hear from other women who have done it or ask opinions anonymously from people who can give feedback on doing it. And then also just give tips of how you stay relevant to the professional world in whatever part of those paths you're at is like really, really important. So that's what I'm hoping to do with those 3 different buckets, and, you know, just be able to share the stories and resources and tips for anyone who either knows they want to go down one of those 3 paths or is already like in that bucket and, you know, just like really needs more help trying to advocate for it to stick.
Yeah, I love that. I'm really interested in this kind of like shift piece. We see a ton of people at Sundays that I feel really lucky to know and to work with that have left their bigger corporate roles, and a lot of times because they didn't get the flexibility and the policy changes that they wanted, and so they've left their bigger corporate roles to kind of start their own consultancy. And a lot of times they are even like selling back to the companies they used to work for, but they paid more for it and they get to control the hours. But I think it's a really interesting. I think we'll continue to see more and more of, especially those women who want like a high level of ownership, taking that step to have full ownership and then get to kind of create the work life that they want.
Totally. And that's the goal, right? Is just to create the work life you want. And I think that it's there, just people don't know how. It's sort of just like stay and suffer or like completely leave or like try to be really lucky and do consulting. And I don't think that it needs to be that like vague, right? Like it should be, if you're interested in doing this, here's like how other people have done it. And just people, you know, people are like, it's not that easy, but I'm like, but it could be if there was more examples that you could just like copy and take and follow. So yeah, that's a goal.
Yeah. Did you have, you're kind of on this middle path. So did you have structure that you, like when you left Sequoia, did you know what the next few months would look like? And did it actually end up looking like that?
No, I mean, I absolutely didn't. And you know, I went on maternity leave in September and my maternity leave went through March. So I really tried to just like actually take 6 months of maternity leave. My first maternity leave was during the pandemic and it was all sorts of wacky and weird and scary and strange. And so I wanted to appreciate just like a normal maternity leave where I could bring my baby out and get coffee with friends and do all of that. So it didn't. I mean, I thought that maybe I would go on maternity leave and start wanting to consult right away. And I kind of took a lot of time to figure out what I actually wanted to do. And then I started to be like, oh, I'll just start an LLC. And that proved to be so complicated and confusing with tax forms and all sorts of things that I just didn't even think of. And so it took a little longer to like establish a scope and pricing and just like what I wanted to do and how I would balance it and how to factor in childcare. I mean, there's so much that goes into establishing your own work agenda in place and still being true to what I wanted to do, which is spend more time with my kids. So because when you're passionate about work, it's very easy to get sucked back into the work. And so I had to both establish a scope for what I wanted to do with anyone who hired me, but also a scope of like my family and like making sure that I was giving enough time to them. So yeah, it's been like a ton of ups and downs, and it definitely didn't look the way I planned for it to be. But I did just try to stick with the hours I wanted, days I wanted, and then be really clear about just working on things that are meaningful to me and companies that are meaningful to me. And I think that was something that I went back and forth a little bit about the beginning, but I'm really glad I did, because it led me to both, but then also just to work with some cool companies I'm now advising on that like I'm actually passionate about, not just I took because it seemed like someone would, hire me. So
Yeah, that makes sense. And do you like looking forward, do you think you'll continue doing kind of the same shape of work and life balance?
a little bit. I mean, that's the goal. Like, I think if there's certain days, like, it's something that like, if you can set aside like the certain days for your family, revolve your hours around what's going on with school or what days off, or even, I've gotten really lucky where I'm like, if I work super hard in the beginning few months of the year, I can truly take off like 6 weeks or 2 months during the summer that is like just kid time, or, so I'm playing around with like the what could life look like. And I've
Yeah.
seen books and podcasts. And like, I think before I jumped into this, I was like, oh, the only people that can do that are the ones that have trust funds and all this money. And now that I'm doing it and I do not have that, I'm like, this actually could work. Like there is a way for the average person to make this work. You just really need to like have the guidance that I am trying to gather and have gotten good advice on, but trying to pull it all together.
Yeah, that will be amazing. Before we get to both, and are there any like favorite role models that you found in this space that people could look to learn from?
Oh my gosh, I should have like made a list of these when I was going through. But I mean, I think like a lot of it is just, I've listened to like various podcasts. Like I talked about this, and we were talking about the graph from like Eve Rodsky about like the fair play and everything. Like I think
Yeah.
that's been something I've loved her podcasts and books, and I've gotten really into the research she's done. So I'd say like that is a North Star for me, just because she's all about balance and incorporating like work and life and relationship. Like it creates a holistic picture that I've used as my star for this. Like it's not just about what I want to do. It's about me and my husband and my kids and the whole balance of it all. So I would say her for sure. And then, yeah, I'll just say her for now. There's a lot of people out there, but I think that's been a good guiding light.
Yeah, I love that. And I know you share, everybody's been sharing kind of the moms are doing it all data from this earlier this week, which I think is so impactful. And I think both and has a lot of resources on the work side that we've talked about, but how are you thinking about, or are you thinking about incorporating like family systems or things that help people manage on that side too?
Totally. Yeah. And that's the goal, right? Is I think in each of the stages, depending on how much professional work you take on, I won't just say work because everything's work, but depending on what path you choose of those three and how much professional work you're taking on, determines how much at home support you need, right? Like if you're going to be in the stay category and work it out to where you're working 4 days a week, that's still 4 days a week that other things are neglected or needing help, right? So that's where home systems come into play, or childcare support, or outsourcing things like what Sundays does. Like all of that is relevant to making the 4-day work week work, versus if you're, more in the step away and stay at home category. Yes, you have a ton of time with the kids, but I have learned being at home on those are days you don't have time to go to the gym or deal with finances or do all these things that I did in between meetings when I was working.
Yeah.
So there's also just, it's all the balance sides to it. So I think for sure it won't just be professional in nature. It's the professional side, but also the at-home side, and just everything that adds up to taking your time during the week will be relevant. So if you have any resources, pass them my way. I'm always looking for resources and stories and all of it.
Yeah, I think when the life admin stuff that I could do when I worked at a bigger company, like during an all company meeting or something like that, that I now have to be like, I'm blocking time on my schedule to do, it's really interesting. Like how many things to incorporate there.
Yes.
Okay, as we are wrapping up, I would love to hear kind of in hindsight, I don't know how many months in you are to this path so far, but what have been some of the biggest personal realizations or lessons you've had in the last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is just, and I heard this from so many people ahead of me, the like whole it can be done or don't sell yourself short. But that really has been the biggest realization. Like, I think that the corporate world creates this facade, for a lack of a better word, especially with like the higher you get in your rankings and the more salary you get and the more equity you get and all these things people refer to golden handcuffs and whatnot. It's just like, I'll never get paid more than this, or I'll never have a better opportunity, or I'll never be able to make this much money on my own. And then you meet these people who have developed their own companies or their own consulting or doing fractional work that are making way more than they were making in the corporate space, and they found a way to do it. And so I really think that concept of like, don't sell yourself short, or don't think that there's just this corporate path to being successful. I think that there's a way for us to make the corporate path better and be able to make that money and have that title at that company with more flexibility. But I also think there's so many ways you can restructure your own career and the way that you contribute on your own. And so like, yeah, that's my goal. Is I don't want anyone to like look at their job and say, well, there's no way I could quit, or there's no way I could change the way this is done, because there is. And I've seen it be done in so many different career paths. And the goal of what I'm doing is just to do like what people told me I could do, and I did. So yeah, I think that's it. As corny as it is, it's just like the don't sell yourself short on it. Like, I do think that there are so many paths to success outside of what people see as being like the best they'll ever get, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that is incredibly valuable. That's been one of my biggest lessons too, is like to remove myself a little bit from this corporate ladder definition of success, and see like what's really important to me and what are the ways I can make that happen. And I think there's just a whole movement of parents and caregivers who are making that happen for themselves. So I'm super excited to see a bunch of their stories on both and to see all the ways that people are defining work for themselves there.
Yeah, love it.
Well, thank you so much, Kaleana. It was so great to talk to you. I know we're on LinkedIn, so people can find you on LinkedIn, but anywhere else that people should be following along so they can see your updates and both and come to life?
Yeah, I mean, for right now, it's just LinkedIn. The site and a newsletter will be out in early next year, which I know is December. So like in the next couple of months. So if you're following me on LinkedIn, I'm going to share it and, announce the website and the address and everything. So just stay tuned there. And like I said, I have an open DM thing. So if you have a story or a resource or anything, like, please share it. And then I'll be doing an intake form shortly of those. But yeah, I'd love to be in touch. I love connecting with people on there.
Amazing. I'm so excited. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thanks everyone for listening. If you're a little bit sick like me and most of my team, I hope that you feel better and have a wonderful holiday season.
Yeah. Okay, bye.
Bye.